Entering the fall of 2015, Universal Orlando Resort would again host the annual premiere Halloween event, Halloween Horror Nights, at Universal Studios Florida. Being in existence for a quarter of a century now, this year would bring all new mayhem to the event, but also see the return of some of the most popular Horror Nights monstrosities. Ready to experience all the carnage once again? Because 25 years of terror has led to this. This is SP History. In developing the 25th edition of Halloween Horror Nights, Universal Creative would return to using an anniversary theme for the event, celebrating the past but also creating new offerings that will lead them into the future. With previous years being heavily influenced by horror intellectual properties, the 2015 event would be a blend of both prominent marketing strategies used in the past, as an original theme would be created for the festivities, all while incorporating major horror IPs to headline the house lineup. But to combine these two aspects, this year would require an icon to host the event, the first time since 2011, and it would see the return of the first original icon, Jack the Clown. A simple storyline would explain the return of the murderous clown, as after being trapped into the lantern with all the other icons in 2010's 20 Years of Fear event, Jack would be released from his eternal prison, along with the other heralds of fear, as he sets to take back Horror Nights with a vengeance, and create a darker version of the Carnival of Carnage. Notably, Jack would have a slight redesign as he looks much darker and sinister, presenting a new version of the icon for guests to anticipate. But like mentioned, this year would also have popular intellectual properties to headline the event, as it would complement the overall theme. For instance, Universal would create a fourth haunted house based off the popular television series AMC's The Walking Dead, being ever so relevant to the premiere Halloween event. Other horror IPs that would be involved are popular films like Freddy vs. Jason and Insidious. So with that said, Halloween Horror Nights 25 would run for 30 nights between September to November, 2 more nights than previous, including 9 haunted houses, the most ever, 5 scare zones, and 2 shows, as 25 Years of Terror would return to Universal Studios Florida, and it'd be one hell of a celebration. In starting to discuss the 9 houses at the 25th anniversary of Halloween Horror Nights, it would be a combination of popular IP-based houses and sequels to classic Horror Nights originals. The first house would be located inside Soundstage 21 and be Jack the Clown's grand tribute to Halloween Horror Nights, as it would be called Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem. Replicating the same concept as 2010's Horror Nights The Hallowed Past, guests would get to relive some of the most terrifying houses from Horror Nights past, all curated by the embodiment of chaos himself. Classic houses to be featured within would be 2008's Scary Tales Once Upon a Nightmare, 2012's Gothic, 2004's Castle Vampire, and many more. Jack Presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem would win House of the Year for 2015. The second house of the event would be located within Soundstage 22 and be the return of the 2013 House of the Year winner, An American Werewolf in London. Inside, guests would get to relive the classic haunted house based off the 1991 horror film as they tried to escape the grasp of the ferocious werewolf. This would be the first time ever that an entire house would be recreated from a previous event, as many of the set pieces would stay the same, only with minor additions. The next house would be placed inside Soundstage 24 and be another epic battle between 2 horror legends, as it would be titled Freddy vs. Jason. Being similar in concept as last year's AVP Alien vs. Predator, guests are caught between the clash of the nightmare killer Freddy Krueger and the machete-wielding Jason Voorhees, experiencing the most deadliest moments of each iconic franchises. Apparently, there were two different endings to the house, with either Freddy winning, holding Jason's mask, or Jason being victorious, carrying Freddy's decapitated head. The fourth house would also be within Soundstage 24 and be a sequel mashup house to Horror Nights classics, as it would be called Body Collectors Recollections. Within here, the maniacal collectors have returned, now setting up shop inside the infamous Shady Brook Asylum from the Psychoscarapy houses, as they invite guests to become a new part of their greatest collection. This would be the first original crossover house to be featured at Halloween Horror Nights. The following house would be placed within the Disaster Queue and be another sequel to a Horror Nights original, as it would be titled Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears. Inside, guests would enter the brutal Hellgate prison from the 2004 original house as they participate in a sick game show where assassins stalk all about, where the ultimate prize is their lives. Though being a sequel to the Run houses, there is no real connection to any of the previous iterations, other than the abundance of chainsaws within. Run, Blood, Sweat, and Fears would be the last house to be ever located within the Disaster Queue. The sixth house of the event would be located inside Sprung Tent 2 and be an IP house based off the popular horror film franchise Insidious, as it shared the same title. Within, guests would relive the most terrifying scenes from the first three films as they entered the further and encountered the sinister demons that exist within. The next house would be placed inside Sprung Tent 1 and be another IP house based off the Universal horror thriller franchise The Purge, as it had the same name. Here, guests would relive scenes and set pieces from the first two films released, as they tried to survive Purge Night from bloodthirsty purgers. Apparently, in the initial concept for this location, it was going to be based off another horror film franchise, Scream, but due to legal reasons, the idea would have to be changed shortly before the event began. This is confirmed through an alternate version of the event's commercial, as Ghostface is featured within it. The eighth house would be located within the Parade Warehouse building and be the fourth rendition of a house based off the zombie television series AMC's The Walking Dead, as this one would be officially called The Walking Dead, The Living, and the Dead. In this year's house, guests would get to experience the most terrifying moments from the fifth season of the show, as they try to escape hordes of walkers and crazed survivors. The final house of the event would be located inside the Shrek Theater, a new location, and be a semi-sequel to a 2008 scare zone, as it would be titled Asylum in Wonderland 3D. Here, guests would follow the White Rabbit through the Looking Glass as they enter a twisted version of the classic fairy tale where Wonderland consists of trippy illusions and disturbing creatures, all ready to prey on the weak. This completes the house lineup of 2015's Halloween Horror Nights event, creating excellent recreations of Horror Nights originals and popular horror intellectual properties. For the scare zones of this year's event, the 5 created will all be nods to the history of Horror Nights, adding to the anniversary theme. The first scare zone would be located in the Plaza of the Stars within Production Central and be a house turned scare zone sequel, as it would be titled Scary Tales Scream Punk. Here, guests would re-encounter the twisted versions of classic fairy tale characters, but now inhabiting a steampunk world. The second scare zone would be placed within the New York area of the park and be another sequel to a Horror Nights classic house series, as it would be called Psychoscarapy Unleashed. Here, the insane inmates of Shady Brook Asylum have escaped and now roam the streets of New York during a Halloween party, looking to kill anything that comes their way. The next scare zone would be located within the San Francisco area and be filled with classic horror film characters, as it would be titled All Night Die-In Double Feature. Being another sequel to a popular Horror Nights house, guests would walk into the Cary Drive-In Theater, where classic and modern-day horror film characters have come to life and are very deadly. Though being a sequel to the director's icon houses, the killer filmmaker would not be featured in the zone, as he would appear in another part of the event. The fourth scare zone would be within the Central Park area and be filled with evil forest creatures, as it would be named Evil's Roots. Here, guests would walk through Central Park overtaken by creatures of nightmares as they seek to feed on their fear. The final scare zone would be placed within the Hollywood area of the park and be dedicated to the history of Halloween Horror Nights, as it would be called Icons HHN. Being like other tribute scare zones from other anniversary years, guests get to encounter all the original icons and monsters that have been created over 25 years of the event, as they relive all the terror. Each former icon would have their own unique set in the zone, as they would have their own victim to sacrifice. Interesting enough, the 2010 icon Fear would not be featured in the zone, as it was explained that Adaro was kept within the lantern as a portrayal from Jack the Clown. Though there was 5 official scare zones, there would be some unofficial zones located throughout the park, supplying extra scares to the streets. The actors in the zones would be labeled as Jack's Maniacs, being in the forms of chainsaw-wielding clowns, prisoners, and rednecks. But the scare zones wouldn't be the only supplement experiences to the event, as 2 shows would be held on each night, adding excellent entertainment for guests to enjoy. The first show would be held near Mel's Drive-In and be Jack the Clown's ultimate stage show, as it would be called The Carnage Returns. Being just like 2007's Jack's Carnival of Carnage, the ringmaster of the Dark Fantastic has returned with his own show, with his companion in Carnage Chance and his loyal maniacs, as they put unwilling participants through grueling traps. The second and final show would be located within the Fear Factor live stage and be another addition to the staple Horror Nights show, Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. In this year's show, Bill and Ted find themselves at Kim Ye's Celebrity Cemetery, where rapper Kanye West and reality star Kim Kardashian gather celebrities to kill their careers and lives, and the Wyld Stallyns must stop them, all while the usual shenanigans ensue with characters and celebrities of 2015. Characters to be within the show were the cast of Pitch Perfect and characters from Jurassic World and Star Wars. This would be the entire slate of offerings that occurred at Halloween Horror Nights 25, including exceptional street scares and energizing entertainment. In review, Halloween Horror Nights 25 would be another excellent anniversary celebration, reliving the best of the past and introducing new properties to be continued in future events. But as Jack and his maniacs return to their hellish confines, Halloween Horror Nights would rest for another year, only to come back the following year as one of Jack's maniacs would finally get her chance to shine.